Today we are going to discuss about constructors in C++. See, all of you know a class is an encapsulation of data and functions. What is a constructor? A constructor is a special member function of a class with the same name as the class name. With the same name as the class name. So suppose if I have got a class called students and there is a function called students in the class, then we will say this is a constructor. So a constructor is a special member function with the same name as the class name. Now see, constructor, whenever we people talk about constructors, so what is the basic objective of a constructor? The basic objective of a constructor is to initialize the values of an object. See, what is the timing of execution of a constructor? A constructor gets executed automatically whenever we create an object of the class. Whenever we create an object of the class, the constructor gets executed automatically. Now see, suppose we have got a class called students, right? And I have got a function with the same name as the class name. Now, of course, this is the constructor. How do we identify this is a constructor? Because this is a function with the same name as the class name. With the same name as the class name. So, it is a constructor. Students is the name of the function, hence it should be called a constructor. Now, constructors, as far as a constructor is concerned, now listen one thing very carefully, as far as constructors are concerned, they are pretty compulsory for an object to be instantiated. All of you know an object is also called an instance. Instance is a verb, and creating an object in the memory amounts to be called instantiate, to instantiate an object. Now see, whenever we people declare an object, the constructor is executed. I repeat it, whenever we people declare an object, the constructor is executed automatically. Now see, one thing is very important that you should keep in mind. Even though a constructor is a special function, but always remember a function can never return a value. A constructor can never return a value. A constructor can never return a value, but we can pass as many arguments, as many parameters to a constructor as we want. Passing the arguments is no problem with constructors, but we cannot make a constructor return any value. Okay, so see, basically constructors are of two types. One is implicit constructors, another is explicit constructors. Explicit constructors, they are further divided into two parts. Constructors with arguments. Constructor with arguments. And second category belongs to constructors without arguments. Constructors without arguments. Now see, constructors with arguments, they are also termed as parameterized constructors. They are also called parameterized constructors. Now first I will explain what is an implicit constructor. Guys, see, if suppose you have written a class and that class does not contain any constructor, any explicit constructor. An explicit constructor is a constructor which has been written by the programmer, the class creator himself. Right? So suppose you have written a class and you have not written any constructor in it. What will happen is, whenever you will create an object of that class, a constructor will be executed, and that constructor will be executed by C++ compiler itself. Now that means if there is no explicit constructor in the class, then what happens is C++ compiler creates a constructor on its own and executes it. This is called an implicit constructor. Because execution of a constructor at the time of creation of an object is very much compulsory. So that means a constructor has to be executed even though there is no explicit constructor in the class. Then comes the role of implicit constructors. So what I'm going to repeat it. Implicit constructor is a constructor which is created and run by C++ compiler on its own when the class does not have any explicit constructor. Now we come to explicit constructors. See, as the name suggests, an explicit constructor is a constructor which has been written by the class creator himself. Right? So they have been further bifurcated into two categories. First one is constructors with argument, second one is constructors without arguments. So explicit constructors, constructors with argument, they are also termed as parameterized constructors. Now see, I am going to give you an example whereby we will be writing an explicit constructor and we will always be talking about a very special type of constructor called default constructor. Now suppose I am going to write down a class in one of my subsequent lectures. I will be talking about the concept of namespaces also. So right now I am not using namespaces. I am simply writing hash input iostream.h. So suppose the name of the class is class products. And these are the instance variables int pno, which stands for product number, floor, price, int you sold. Then I'm going to write down a constructor C products. As you know, this is a constructor. Why? Because this is a member function which is having the same name as the class name. This is parameterized constructor. Parameterized constructor means constructor with arguments. Now, I have written a very special member function called show. So whenever this function will be invoked by any current object, it will be showing the values, the instance variables of that particular current object. Now see, here we go, we are going to write down the function name. Listen carefully, if you people are using dev C++, instead of writing void main, you are supposed to write int main. So here I am giving the example in Turbo C++ 3.0, that is 16-bit compiler. Here we go, products, PR1, then PR2, see carefully, here what we have done is, we have declared two objects of the class products. Products PR1, I am passing the parameters, then PR2, again I am passing the three parameters. Now what will happen is, as I have explained earlier, what is the timing of execution of a constructor? A constructor gets executed automatically whenever an object of the class is created, declared, or we can say instantiated. So in this case, first products PR1 101 1520, you are going to create instantiate an object of products class, namely PR1. What will happen is the control will automatically go to the constructor with arguments, that is products. So what will happen is the value 101 that will be transferred to the formal argument PNO1, the value 1500 will go into the variable price1, and the value 20 that will go down into the variable usesold1. All these are, they constitute formal argument, right? Now the values, these values they have been put only into the formal arguments. See, what is the basic objective of a constructor? I repeat it. The basic objective of a constructor is to initialize the values of the object. The values of object means instance variables of the object. So right now, what values we have passed from the function main, those values have been put into the formal arguments. So what we should do right now is we should assign the values which have been put into the formal arguments into respective instance variables. So value 101 was collected by the formal argument PNO1, that will be put into PNO. That was 101, 1500 values that was put into the formal argument price1, that will be assigned to the instance variable price. Value 20 will be that was captured by usesold1 formal argument, that will be assigned to the instance variable usesold. So your object is prepared. Secondly, again in case of PR2 products PR2 202 6935, again this constructor will be invoked and 202 value will be captured by the formal argument PNO1, 1600 value will be captured by the formal argument price1, and 35 value is going to be captured by the formal argument usesold1. Now the current object happens to be PR2, so what will happen is these values will be subsequently, they will be assigned to the respective instance variables. So we have got initialized both these objects. Subsequently, I would write PR1 dot show, PR2 dot show. This will do nothing else, but it will be displaying the values of the objects PR1 and PR2 respectively. Now, guys, next thing that I am going to discuss is very important. See, products PR3. Here I am declaring an object called PR3. As you can see, I am not passing any parameters. As I have told you earlier, it is mandatory for an object to get the constructor executed for it. Now what will happen is, in case of PR3, do we have a matching constructor? No. This is not the matching constructor. Why? Because at the time of declaring the object PR3, we are not passing any parameters. So what will happen is, what comes into our mind is, implicit constructor will play its role. So that is what I mean to say is, C++ compiler should automatically execute a constructor for PR3, which as we have termed, which is called implicit constructor. No, that is not going to happen. Why? Listen carefully, because as per the rule, not in C++, in Java, C#.NET also, as per the rule, what happens is, if you have got one explicit constructor in the class, the role of implicit constructor is simply blocked. The role of implicit constructor is simply blocked. Now, implicit constructor is not going to be executed by the compiler. Now, what will happen is, products PR, because execution of a constructor is compulsory, so it will be erroneous. Here the error message will be displayed. So what we will do is, in order to prevent this error message, I would be writing default constructor. Default. Would you please pan your camera on this? Products, empty parenthesis, meaning there are not going to be any arguments. Default constructor, and see carefully, the body of the constructor, that too is empty. It is called default constructor. Now what will happen is, when you people will be creating products PR3, will be declaring products PR3, it will go into the class and look for a matching constructor. The first one is not matching because it is containing 3 formal arguments and we are not passing any argument in case of declaration of PR3. The matching constructor happens to be this one, which is called default constructor. This is the default constructor. So what about assigning values to the PR3? What you guys can do is you can write down a function that is supposed to input the values of instance variables for the object PR3. So guys, what I have tried to explain is the role of constructors in a class. It really makes your class very attractive and very easy to work with. Thanks.